News update 7:30. Chicago's Morning Answer continues next on AM 560. The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Just in terms of what's going on college campuses, very interesting. Sometimes some of the useful idiots that have been trained at places like the Teamster Hall in Chicago and what to say and how to say it,
Right.
Sometimes they slip up.
Oh, they do? Like death to America, death to Israel? What is
No,
it?
that's not slipping up. That's what
No,
that's what they're supposed to say.
Right.
But let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. This student at Florida International University, not perhaps as prepared to be a good little propagandist as the Ivy League kids. They've had, more training. Maybe they have more bandwidth when it comes to this sort of subversion. But this FIU student, she kind of messed up.
All right, I want to hear it.
She let it slip.
Uh-oh.
In every single protest that we have, our actions have had counter-protesters, and there is never any backlash, and never police protecting us. In fact, our police are directly protecting counter-protesters, even at our events. So I want to ask you all, is Palestinian life not worth mourning? And we as Arabs, Palestinian, Muslim, and anti-Jewish students, are we not worth protecting?
Did you say anti-Jewish students?
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that, please?
Did you say anti-Jewish students? Oh, so this isn't about the state of Israel. This is not about Bibi Netanyahu's policies. This isn't. I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm anti-Zionist. These distinctions without much difference that these flacks try to offer, like Ilhan Omar, for example, or Rashida Tlaib. Anti-Jewish students. Not non-Jewish students, anti-Jewish students is the phrase that she used. See, she let it slip.
Yeah, she's not ready for prime time. She's a try-hard. Yeah. But I'm glad she is, because it's good to expose them for who they are.
Yeah, it should be obvious, but it's always more helpful when they just say it explicitly, isn't it? For more on what's going on college campuses, and as we were talking about with respect to Denver, in Big Blue City, America, because basically those are just big college campuses these days. Pleased to be joined again by former Indiana governor and former Purdue University president, Mitch Daniels. Mitch, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan.
So, you had to deal with perhaps not something on this order of magnitude during your time at Purdue, but maybe I'm misremembering. But certainly the people that wanted to protest and whatever the grievance of the day was. And, how did you handle this as a university president, particularly maybe comparing and contrasting yourself from, say, the university presidents in the Ivy League or Northwestern, for example?
Our approach was, first of all, to establish early on, clear protective policies around free speech. We routinely sought and got the best rating that the watchdog groups offer in terms of encouraging an atmosphere of free inquiry. But I think we were equally clear in telling people where the lines were. In other words, speech is different than conduct. And we protect the former and have rules about the latter. And then there are speech that's addressed to a topic, no matter how asinine or insipid or offensive that speech is, we would protect, but not speech that was directed at a person, an ethnic group, or threatened anyone. And we enforced the rules as they needed to be, and I think that was the appropriate balance that people have been trying to strike. But also, there's a deterrent value to doing what you said you do. And I think that probably helped us have a calmer environment as these enthusiasms come and go.
Well, what if they try to set up an encampment in the main quad area? What would you do?
We would remind them that housing is the university's prerogative, and that's conduct of a kind that is outside our rules. There was, I'm happy to say, my successor has done, I think, a very fine job in the current situation. They had a much milder version of what's gone on elsewhere, but there was a few tenths or something of that kind. They told them they had to have them down by a certain hour. The students complied, had their say, but in this case, nobody had to go to jail.
And I mean, do you have so? I guess the question is, and maybe the answer is pretty straightforward. Outside of Ben Sass, in terms of the president of a significant university in terms of size and diversity, state university like the University of Florida, and then the quote-unquote prestige universities, and I really do put those in quotes these days. Well, why isn't there more college presidents, administrations of universities that are following the Mitch Daniels example and your predecessor there at Purdue, it sounds like, or the example of, like a Larry Arnn at Hillsdale College and some of the small liberal arts colleges where the culture is just so different that it's not going to go down like that. But at the big universities where you're going to have kids from a lot of different perspectives, including the pro-Palestinian, in some cases pro-Hamas kids on campus, why you just don't see the model that you said replicated? And go ahead, have your say, no matter how vile and asinine it is, as you said. But then there are lines, and then we enforce the lines. We got to referee this thing.
I'm going to take a half full view, Dan, of what we've seen recently. First of all, you have to remember that dogs that didn't bark, there are an awful lot of places where we didn't have these problems, or they were handled in a very responsible way. Secondly, with obvious exceptions, I was a little bit cheered up that I think there's a little more boldness now. I think the worm has turned a little bit. We did see places call in law enforcement where necessary. We did see lots of arrests. We've seen here and there some suspensions. Now, my own view is the direct and prompt expulsions would be a very good idea. First of all, to emphasize the importance we place on having boundaries of civil behavior on campus, and secondly, as a deterrent to the future. The schools that do that are less likely to have this problem again and again. But I do think that there have been some signs of greater backbone this time than maybe we saw in 2020. Follow-through is really important. I keep emphasizing prosecutors. We've got a lot of them, and I'm afraid in your city, maybe this is an example, that won't prosecute even worse offenses. And if they don't prosecute these, that will send a very bad signal.
Well, but I mean, it's even worse than that. And this is at some smaller universities, too, like Emerson, where you had, this was a week or 10 days ago, you had kids basically they were assaulting police officers. One kid's got one of those empty Hinkley water bottles, and he's hitting a cop like over the head as the cops are pushing them, trying to get them out of this takeover of some building on campus that they did. And then ultimately the police relented. So there was some arrest made. Emerson College paid to bond the kids out that were arrested.
Well, here we'll go back one level further. So many of the problems that we've seen on campuses, whether it's what we're discussing now or the excessive cost of college, can be traced to boards of trustees who didn't do their job, haven't over time. Yeah. And in this case, whoever's president there probably ought to be replaced by someone who will set a higher standard and represent the school better.
You're thinking about this from a policy perspective, which you always do. For federal level, obviously, there are federal purse strings here. There is not just the student aid that the federal government provides, but also the research funding and other funding that flows from the federal government into colleges and universities. Trump has weighed in on this. So has Biden, in the sense of, I guess, unilaterally and unconstitutionally forgiving student loans. But Trump is talking about looking at endowments, looking at funding of these universities, and using the power of the purse to try to institute some discipline from the federal level. What's your perspective about federal action as it pertains to sort of everything under the umbrella of colleges and universities, starting with the violence on campus?
I would simply start by saying the federal government's broke. It needs to start reducing spending on all kinds of things, and this would be a fairly easy call. I might be more careful about research, because I do think that research into legitimate, at least scientific and technological advances, is a pretty important thing for us to do. But much of the rest the federal government does, whether or not colleges are using it well or misbehaving, is money we can't afford to borrow and print.
Yeah, I know you talk. I mean, just to take that indication and develop it a little bit more. I mean, but when you were contemplating a presidential run back a decade plus ago now, I guess, you wrote, we gave a speech and offered remarks about the so-called Red Menace, and you weren't talking about Red China or the Soviet Union. We were talking about Red Ink, and and as a successful Republican governor and Republican leader, what's your perspective on debt and deficits? We hear from the modern monetary theorists that deficits and debt doesn't matter. We have a chief economist or economic advisor for Biden who can't explain the difference between currency and purchasing power, doesn't really know why the government borrows money when it can't go bankrupt and so forth. I mean, some really troubling ignorance on display. But the Republican Party doesn't really seem to have much of an appetite to take up this issue of debt and deficits. I mean, there's some jawboning about it, but you're not seeing substantial proposals in the direction of dealing with it.
Regrettably, that's accurate. I probably couldn't write the same book or give the same speech today, because there's been no evidence at all that we could rally the country to address this as something we have in common. I mean, and we do have it in common when, and I'm sorry to say it's when, not if, the crunch comes, it'll hurt virtually every American in one way, worse for the most vulnerable among us. So, no, you're right. Presidents and members of both parties have not only not addressed the problem, they have each in their own way made it worse. We have two candidates for president, each basically promising to make it worse. Modern monetary theory had a very short shelf life. It's on that shelf now with Lysenkoism and the Piltdown Man and other myths or frauds of the past. But you can pick up any at this point credible journal and find very mainstream people saying exactly what some of us have been saying for a long time, that you can't go on forever, that no endeavor of any kind can become as indebted as we are and not sacrifice its sovereignty and at some point. So I'm afraid it's going to take, as many have always said, a genuine crisis to bring about some necessary correction. But for the moment, it's obviously bad politics to tell people we can't go on as we have. And it's going to be a very, I'm afraid, serious blot on the record of us as a self-governing people when we're forced to tell, for instance, Social Security recipients, sorry about your luck, money's gone, and we don't have a way to completely keep our promises to you.
Now, Indiana just recently had their primary on Tuesday, and I was wondering, I know you didn't endorse anybody for that, but now are you moving forward? Are you going to be endorsing the Republican nominee?
Well, Amy, I won't need to. Not to introduce a big topic you didn't call about, but we'll have a new governor. I hope he'll be a fine one. He's elected by 5% of the American public, the Indiana registered voters, because we are now a one-party state, as 40 of the 50 states are, and it's a new phenomenon. If you're in a state, if you're in Illinois and you're a Democrat, I guess you're happy about it. If you're an Indiana Republican, you may be happy about it, but I'm not sure it's healthy long term. So we had a primary. 12% of the registered voters voted in the Republican primary, and the winner got less than 40% of that. So 5% of the registered voters have determined who our next governor will be. And I'm not sure that's a formula for, competition in business or any walk of life promotes innovation. It's always a good thing. Promotes improvement. And, when you get to a situation like ours, which is now typical, I'm not sure that you get the kind of progress that our free institutions have always produced.
I think that's a good point, and I think the contrast is well considered because we've seen it, and there are examples in Indiana where you get fat and happy, and you start to atrophy a little bit. You start to stray away from the principles you said you were going to act in advance of when you ran and when you were elected. That can happen to conservatives too. In fact, or just even the rank and file Republicans. I mean, one of the reasons that Illinois is a one-party state, as you properly described, is because the Republican Party, when it had its day back in the 80s and 90s, lost its way because it did exactly what I said. It became another spoils of war party, indistinguishable from the Democrats. And long term, the Democrats turned out to be better at it.
Yeah, and this is not a criticism of any of the, 6 candidates that competed this week. They did what made sense to win. They talked about things that really had nothing to do with being governor of Indiana. They were going to combat the Chinese and the hard left and the Mexican border and so forth. This state has problems and it has opportunities. They were not incentivized to talk about those. We didn't hear a word about how we might improve our educational outcomes, about the fact that we're importing electricity where once we exported it, and we're going to need more of it to be an economic power that we can be, all these sort of things. And so I do think that the lopsided politics, which various trends, social and otherwise, have brought us into, is not conducive necessarily to the kind of good give and take that our politics is capable of and in its best days produces.
Well, you're always a source of hope for Illinois because prior to your election, correct me if I'm wrong, there were, people forget this now because of the last 2 decades, but for the 2 decades prior to your election as governor, it was Democrat governors of Indiana, right?
Yeah, that's right. It seems like only yesterday, but we had a very balanced system. Half the time I served in that job, we had a divided legislature, and you had to find ways to work together. You had to identify issues that a broad majority of the public could be enthusiastic about, not just a sliver on one end or the other. But that was then. We'll have to find ways to move ahead. Indiana's still doing fine. We're still receiving lots of Illinois residents.
Oh, yeah. That won't stop. Yeah.
I give you my business every weekend.
I used to, we saw so many Illinois students on our campus, I would always tell them, we have a generous asylum policy here in Indiana. we welcome people fleeing political oppression.
That's right. You should get some of U of I's money because you're basically becoming a U of I extension campus in part in West Lafayette.
They're a fine school, but Purdue's always been blessed, and never more than today, with a very large number, over 1,000 each year now, of students coming from Illinois.
All right. Very good. Very good. Mitch Daniels, former Purdue University president, of course, former governor of the great state of Indiana. Mitch, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to Dan and Amy on your smartphone. Download the AM 560 mobile app today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Parents, grandparents, you might want to be sitting down because this is amazing news. Imagine the student in your family not asking you for money to pay for college, or better yet, not getting into years and years of debt. How's this possible? Scholarships.com, a trusted and widely used scholarship platform that helps your student find scholarships and navigate the financial aid process. Get help to pay for college through a personalized list of scholarships that your student actually qualifies for. Better yet, every scholarship is vetted to ensure accuracy. And now the best part, drum roll please, it's absolutely free. Go to scholarships.com today. Both students and parents can join for free. And within minutes, receive your list of personalized scholarship matches. Check out the wealth of information and resources available at no cost. And read the fantastic reviews from other scholarship winners. Scholarships.com has helped over 23 million students and families find scholarships to help pay for college. And will help you too. Join scholarships.com today for free. That's scholarships.com.
All right. Permaseal, you've heard about them. They've been around for 40 plus years, still family owned and operated. They have a wonderful review with the BBB, Better Business